What will it take to convince you to run for president?
Well, I hope there's an age limit.
Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, I know people don't like these videos. Okay, I know people don't like these videos, but this is a true crime channel. Okay, and this is also kind of a psychology channel, right? Right now, we are in a very acute phase of a major scandal in Washington. Okay, this scandal is a high crime. Okay, and it's not just the Biden presidency, right? We are at an acute phase, okay, of a very serious scandal involving old age, people with very old age holding very high positions in the Supreme Court, in the Senate, and in the presidency. And more than a scandal, I really honestly think this amounts to a kind of high crime. Okay, because just like we're criticizing Donald Trump for getting people to, do a theatrical attack on the Capitol 4 years ago, which was terrible, right? Well, now we have all these old people that are essentially taking possession of very high offices and even whole branches of the government, right? I mean, because when someone is the Speaker of the House or when someone is like a majority leader in the Senate, that is effectively taking control of a very high, of a whole branch of the government, right? So to me, that is just as serious as the January 6th attack, if not more serious, okay? It is more than a scandal, it's a high crime. Okay, and what really bugs me is that everybody who wants to deal with this is so slavishly, like ridiculously diplomatic about it, and everybody just has to talk about, oh, I love Joe Biden. I love Joe Biden.
I love Joe Biden. I work for Joe Biden.
And I did work for him. And as I've said, I love Joe Biden.
Yeah.
He is a great human being.
The New York Times published an op-ed by actor George Clooney headlined, "I love Joe Biden."
Without any apologies, that I love Joe Biden.
I mean, that is to me kind of the sign of like dysfunction, and in a way, I think we don't even really know what love looks like.
I love NATO. I love NATO.
Listen,
I'm like almost Tommy level nerd on this stuff. I love NATO. I love NATO.
Okay. And I think maybe we should scratch our heads and wonder, if maybe love doesn't look a different way, And sometimes we have to go to people from earlier generations, wiser people who can show us and remind us what real love looks like.
If I were just 80 years old, if I was 15 years younger, I don't believe I could undertake the duties that I experienced when I was president.
Think about what that is. That's a lost and forgotten aspect of real love, which is called leveling with somebody, leveling with people. We talk so much about telling the truth and telling the truth. Maybe the real concept is leveling with people, and to see it as love. That's the other thing. If you can't see it as love, then maybe you don't know what love is.
But one thing, you have to be very flexible with your mind. You have to be able to go from one subject to another and concentrate on each one adequately and then put them all together in a comprehensive way. You also have to be able to adopt new ideas. Just in foreign affairs, I don't think that I could undertake them if I was 80 years old.
And we should really ask ourselves, I've found it difficult to put into words how exactly I feel with Karine Jean-Pierre, okay, that White House spokesperson who's always lying, And I have a funny feeling that Karine Jean-Pierre probably feels like she's always telling the truth. But then the real question is, okay, Karine Jean-Pierre, and this is the question for both her and for Jen Psaki and people like her, when do you ever level with us? Yeah, you tell us a lot of truth, whatever that means, but when do you ever level with us? And we should honestly be very concerned about people who tell a lot of truth, but never know how to level with us, right? Never know how to level with anybody. To me, a person who tells a lot of truth and doesn't know how to level with people, I kind of wonder what good is their love.
And I did work for him. And as I've said, I love Joe Biden.
Yeah.
He is a great human being.
Listening there to Jen Psaki in that little mix, talking about how she loved Biden, it's kind of interesting to see what does love really mean to a person like Jen Psaki? Honestly, what does love really mean to her?
I love NATO. I love NATO.
Listen,
I'm like almost Tommy level nerd on this stuff.
And the reason I say that is because, Jen Psaki was one of the very main people from the White House that was really trying to put a lot of fog on this whole Nord Stream sabotage, right? And it's funny because, and this brings up Biden's age, because Biden himself, and this is why they don't let Biden out, to do press conferences, because Biden will do things and say things, because he was asked about the Nord Stream, the viability of the Nord Stream pipeline right before Russia invaded Ukraine, right? And he did something that the White House would never acknowledge, including Jen Psaki.
Mr. President, I have wanted to ask you about this Nord Stream project that you've long opposed.
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
And so, here we see that Biden's age gets mixed up with really, really big issues, okay, including, as Jimmy Carter pointed out, whether Biden actually has, let's say, the youthful flexibility to maybe get rid of some of his own prejudices about, let's say, NATO and expanding into, Russia's territory, and let's say opposing something like, the Nord Stream pipeline. So we really have to ask whether Biden's age had something to do with, let's say, maybe too rigid of a position, and let's say maybe even a conflict of interest going into Ukraine, where Biden already had, like, say, a prejudiced, pre-decided attitude about wanting to, let's say, put Putin down or make Putin weaker, or let's say weaken Russia's economic position in Europe. You see, so really it may not just be about, let's say, protecting the sovereignty of Ukraine, but it also may have been a larger design part of Biden's prejudices from his old Cold War days, where he wanted to, like, say, try to weaken Russia, and he, let's say, and you could say, well, fine, you want to play some chess, but maybe a younger person would hold in the calculus that if you want to play such a big chess game, well, how many young people have to die for that chess game, right? It's not just a game of chess, like, oh, let's just move some pieces here, let's move some pieces there. The Nord Stream is not the only chess piece. You also have pawns on that chessboard, and those pawns take the form of young people who apparently in Ukraine don't even want to be fighting. A lot of the conscripts in Ukraine that have been, let's say, taken into the armed forces in the military in Ukraine have been young people basically kidnapped off the street. So this is a very serious issue. And I just get the feeling, looking at Biden, that he has, let's say, a conflict of interest. He has, like, his own personal Cold War ideas, maybe even personal interest in Ukraine. And he let right out of the bag, that he wanted to sabotage the Nord Stream pipeline. And again, the age comes in the picture. Why could the White House credibly deny that Biden wanted, pre-announced that we would be sabotaging the Nord Stream pipeline?
If Russia invades, then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
Again, they can use his age. They could say, well, he didn't really know what he was talking about. He really didn't know how to answer the question. So again, we need to take old people out of office, because they're going to say things they're not supposed to say. And then when they do say things that they don't want us to know about, that the let's say the administration doesn't want us to know about, well, then the administration can use their age to make it sound like they didn't really mean what they said. So this whole issue of age is actually confusing and complicating something as delicate as a war, a proxy war with Russia, where we are barely concealing that we are actively, literally fighting this war against Russia.
In foreign affairs, I don't think that I could undertake them if I was 80 years old.
And to me, this is just a reminder. This is just a reminder that people with common sense, okay, people with ordinary, old-fashioned common sense could see this problem with Biden 4 years ago.
If I were just 80 years old, if I was 15 years younger, I don't believe I could undertake the duties that I experienced when I was president.
And I think the same should be said about, let's say, Bernie Sanders, or let's say Donald Trump, people that are just unfortunately getting too old. As much as it may cause us fear, and as much as we may be afraid, to just roll the dice and take the risk, why not just put our trust in people like, for example, like, say, Tulsi Gabbard or Cory Booker, or let's say, Rand Paul, or, whatever. There's plenty of people who are in their age range who may not be perfect people, but we can just give up this bizarre reliance on very old people.
Well, I hope there's an age limit.
Remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Ruth Bader Ginsburg held on to her position as a Supreme Court justice until she was 87 years old. Okay, and she died right at a time when Trump could put in another conservative justice. Okay, so this is very serious. It happens on both sides, right? Mitch McConnell is the same age as Biden, and he also has neurodegenerative disease, right? He has neurological degeneration, right? And let's see, you have a classic example of Dianne Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein was almost 91 when she died in office, right? Holding on to office, just like Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley is also, I think, about to turn 91. Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, Nancy Pelosi is about to turn 84. Sorry, Nancy Pelosi is 84. Okay. And if you watch recent videos of Nancy Pelosi, she also has issues manufacturing her syllables and putting her thoughts into words because she's getting old. Okay. So this is a real problem. And I'm sorry, we need to do something, some kind of legislation, some kind of even an amendment to the Constitution where we don't have this problem of all these Nancy Pelosi's and all these Mitch McConnells and all these Ruth Bader Ginsburgs. There has to be some way to put reasonable age limits in politics, some way to do it. I don't know how we'll do it. Maybe we have to go so far as to amend the Constitution. But I really think we ought to have the guts to just, put a reasonable limit, and I think a reasonable limit, just like Jimmy Carter said, maybe 80 years old is a little too old for a high office. Maybe we can make an exception for the House of Representatives, because they're only 2-year terms. If you really want to be an 85-year-old person, you can do like Nancy Pelosi. You can give up the speaker position and you could just be an ordinary member of the House of Representatives. Maybe we should allow that. But as far as like the Senate or the Supreme Court or presidency, I think 80 years old is just too old. And I think we ought to have the guts and the common sense, the old-fashioned common sense to just realize that, and not keep on arguing something that really doesn't deserve to be argued.
If I were just 80 years old, if I was 15 years younger, I don't believe I could undertake the duties that I experienced when I was president.
And if we think about it, okay, this scandal, this problem of very elderly people holding very high offices, okay, in, let's say, the legislature or the executive or even in the Supreme Court, okay, this problem of very elderly people holding too much power, all right, this can have unintended consequences, okay, because I can assure you, while we're screaming about Biden pretending to hold on to power, I think this age scandal is actually concealing another scandal. Okay, so the problem with scandals is they can give cover and shadow so that other scandals can appear. Okay, like for example, maybe what's happening with Biden right now, maybe he's only pretending to hold on to power. That's what I think. I don't think he really wants to hold on to power. I think he's pretending to hold on to power. So one scandal is giving cover for some other shenanigans, okay? Because I think Biden is up to something else, okay? Because maybe he's plotting with that Clyburn guy from South Carolina because they're trying to plot a way to make it easier for Kamala Harris to become the nominee without having to go through normal democratic processes, okay? So this is the other problem. When you start having a major scandal, it can give cover and shadow for other scandals to start unfolding. Okay. Because I think that's the next scandal. If somebody like Kamala Harris really wants to be president, well, she needs to earn it like anybody else. And she needs to go through a normal competition like anybody else. Okay. And so the problem I have with this age thing is that just like with the Nord Stream, and the Ukraine war and other problems, having one scandal and one problem tends to lead to more problems. Okay. So, if we really want to clean up our world, clean up our government, maybe we should give some real consideration to what Jimmy Carter said. Jimmy Carter's about to turn 100 years old. Okay. He probably won't live to be 100. He's like months away from being 100. But Jimmy Carter in the end has become kind of a prophet for our times, and maybe we should heed what he's saying, and really talk about Why can't we just talk about, Jimmy Carter's not afraid to talk about it. Everybody else is saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. But Jimmy Carter, he shows real love. He says what nobody can say, what everybody's afraid to say. We should have age limits, reasonable age limits. Because, starting with, let's say a crisis of elderly people taking over political parties or political offices. Well, those kind of scandals will tend to lead to other scandals. That's my point. Anyway, really appreciate your patience, and thanks for watching.